Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Liz Frassini and I am the chair of the College Fairs Committee for the Pennsylvania Association for College Admission Counseling, also known as PACAC. We are excited because this is the very first session in our Keystone Virtual College Exploration Program, which will take place October 1st through November 6th of this fall. We're excited to have you join us today. Before we get started, I would like to review a few housekeeping items. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions for the panelists throughout the presentation, please submit your questions there and they will address the questions throughout the presentation. Your camera and microphone are off and muted for today's webinar. It is a webinar feature, so the best way to engage with the panelists is to submit your questions via the Q&A box. We have a long program and lots of different institutions participating in this virtual exploration, over 300 unique institutions and almost 300 different panels and individual information sessions. So if you're interested in signing up for additional sessions beyond this one today, please do so at www.pacac.org/virtual. We hope you'll take time to explore those sessions and sign up for as many as you'd like to attend. The recording of this webinar will also be available on the PACAC website at the same address I just mentioned, www.pacac.org/virtual. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to our lovely panelists.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Preparing a Great College Essay Application, Preparing a Great College Application, including the essay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jeremy Branch. I'm the Senior Assistant Director of Enrollment Management at Penn State. I work out of the Brandywine campus, but do admission for the entire university. I am also the president of the Pennsylvania Association for College Admission Counseling, the very organization putting on this program. So it's nice to be with all of you today.
And my name is Mary Smith. I am the Senior Associate Director of Admissions at Gettysburg College in South Central Pennsylvania, and I'm the immediate past president of PACAC, the Pennsylvania Association for College Admission Counseling. This is year 20 for me, and I'm so excited to be with all of you today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael May. I'm the Director of First Year Admissions at Slippery Rock University, just about an hour north of Pittsburgh. And I'm also currently the Finance and Budget Chair for PACAC.
And to give you a little context, we thought we would start by just briefly introducing each of our institutions as well to each of you.
Thank you, Mary. So we're going to start with Penn State. Who are we? We are one of the most unique large colleges and universities you could ever attend. And that really boils down to three things: our options, opportunities, and outcomes for all students. You see the options in terms of our campus system. 20 campuses that differ in terms of size and location, but offer you this same education, which is nice. You also see it in the round number of college majors that we have, with over 275 different programs. And then also the outcomes piece with the world's largest dues-paying alumni association and one of the best career services offices in the country as well.
And as I mentioned, I represent Gettysburg College. Gettysburg is in South Central Pennsylvania, that world famous town of Gettysburg. We are about an hour and a half north of Washington, D.C., with 2,600 students. What I love about Gettysburg is it is a national college of the liberal arts and sciences. So you get to dive in deep to whatever major you choose, and there's about 70 different majors to choose from. But at the same time, you get the broad brushstrokes of all the different other academic areas too. I'll mention three important things about Gettysburg that I hope you take away and impact the rest of this session as we talk about application review and essays. The first I'll mention is that Gettysburg is all about hands-on. We want to make sure you have the opportunities to do research, to do internships, to have hands-on experiences. The second thing I will mention is that we have incredible financial aid. While we are a private school and tuition can be sometimes considered a little steep, we have incredible financial aid and scholarship opportunities to balance that out. And lastly, I will mention that our top 4 majors at Gettysburg, things we're really known for: business, political science, psychology, biology, biochem. So truly a liberal arts curriculum where they cross different disciplines. That's a little bit about Gettysburg College.
Now we switch to the western part of the state, right, with Slippery Rock University. Slippery Rock is one of the 14 PA schools in the state system of higher education. We are a mid-sized regional public school. I did want to mention a little bit about some of our more popular majors, which include our accelerated undergraduate graduate programs. So think about 3+2 and 3+3 programs with physician assistant studies, athletic training, occupational therapy, and physical therapy. We also boast in the Pennsylvania state system of higher ed the #1 four-year graduation rate, which I know is important to everyone. We also give out more than $6 million in both academic and need-based scholarships each year. I want to mention that, like many schools, we are test optional for fall 2021 and beyond. And also, if you're coming out west, campus is open for visitations. We are having daily visits and tours on campus in small groups.
So that's a little bit about the three of our institutions, which will help to give some context as we go into the whole point of this program, really dissecting what makes a great college application. And speaking of dissection, let's take apart what an application looks like. Mike.
Thanks, Mary. I'm going to focus on the quantitative factors of an admissions decision. And really, I think we would all agree that transcripts are the foundation of your application. While some schools are test optional or test blind, every school is going to be looking at your high school transcript. We're going to ask questions like, how have you done day in and day out over a period of 4 years to really try to gauge your fit for our campus and how well you'll do as a member of our community. We'll ask questions like, did you challenge yourself appropriately and take advantage of the resources available to you in your high school? These are things that we can tell from your transcript. And are you rounding into form and sprinting through the tape? You're going to hear me say that a little bit later on as well. We want to make sure that you are rounding into shape and certainly ending on a high note as you end your high school career. And then it's not a surprise that COVID threw everybody for a loop this year, but for those schools who are incorporating test scores into their review, it provides an extra level of context for us in terms of your academic readiness for college.
Speaking a little bit from an institutional perspective, some people will ask me, well, what does Gettysburg want? What are you looking for in an application? And I think it's definitely what Mike was saying in describing those quantitative things and what Jeremy will talk about in terms of those qualitative things in your application. And sometimes, frankly, it's just the institution. It's not us, it's me. It's kind of like dating. It's not you, it's me. is kind of a good analogy that I like to use, because sometimes the institution has priorities that we're looking for through the process that are beyond your control. Maybe that's music. For example, where I sit, I work closely with Gettysburg's Conservatory of Music. And so I'm looking for example, great oboe players, great harpist, somebody who has that hook, if you will. That's something that's, though, specific to my institution. Athletics can play a role. If your lacrosse program is looking for that, number one, they have 3 spots to fill, and that's really where they're looking. That's an institutional priority. And this year might be different from next year. So for those of you who are juniors watching this presentation, it can shift. It helps to really ask the school, what are some of the institutional priorities that you're looking for? Diversity of all kinds. And that truly means diversity of all kinds. I think I can safely say all of us are looking for that. And that means geographic diversity. It means religious diversity, racial and ethnic diversity, socioeconomic diversity, truly diversity of all kinds, because all of you shape our campuses. You make our communities. And we have to pay attention to all of those different pieces of the puzzle. I will say we don't honestly get a lot of students from Alaska. If you're from Alaska, awesome. That's something a little different. So again, it's looking at diversity in all of its kinds. Sometimes programs can be very specific. Gettysburg is liberal arts, so we're looking at students coming in from all different academic interests. But if you were looking at a school that specifically had, say, a healthcare program where you were looking at specifically that, and they had different requirements around that particular program, that can play a role, because the institution, the broader institution, might have certain goals, but then that program might also have specific goals on how many students they're looking for, or how many students they can even take in that particular year. And then that last one, fiscal health. What does that mean? An admissions office is the fiscal health of its institution. We're able to survive because of the students we enroll to our campuses. So that can play a role as well through this whole wonderful application process that, once again, is us and not you. But you can actually get a sense of that by asking all of us as admissions recruiters, what is it you're looking for? What is your institution looking for through this process?
And that diversity of all kinds piece, Mary, really lends itself and dovetails nicely into the qualitative pieces of your application, because we don't really get to know necessarily who you are and what you're going to bring to our college and university just off of the quantitative pieces, right? Quantity meaning the numbers typically, right? That's a term we use in the math world a lot, but more so on the quality pieces, the descriptive, not what you did, but why did you do it? Not what you're applying for, but why that specific program. So we in admissions, we spend a lot of time reviewing the qualitative pieces of your application. What you see on the slide here are some of those pieces that we put under qualitative. This is where those extracurricular activities come into play. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the importance of transcripts and academics as we move forward in our discussion. But students are always wondering and asking each of us, where do my extracurriculars come into play? How much do they matter? And this is where they are important. Now, we're not looking for you to be involved in certain activities in particular. There's no rubric, right, where we start to check it off. Okay, they did a sport, they did drama, they did stage crew. That's not how it works. We just essentially want to know, what do you do when the bell rings? When it's 2:30, and if we were on campus in the fall, what would you do with the rest of your day? Are you doing something through a club or an organization? Are you part of some type of community service project? Are you perhaps working part-time and contributing to your family in that way? Or are you the type of student who just goes home and plays Call of Duty Warzone all day? We want to know what you like to do. And the reason why that matters to us is it gives us an indication of what you're going to do when you come to us. What clubs and organizations are you going to be involved in when you come to us? And also, if there's a chief activity or thing that you're committed to in your high school that we don't have, it allows us to address that with you as well. Later on in our discussion, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about essays and the personal statement, but this is a place where students can really jump off the page to us. We get a sense of your personality, sometimes your sense of humor, your worldview, your intellectual capacity, how you think about things. It really allows us to get to know you as a person in a much deeper way. Your recommendation letters do that for us as well. Now, one of the things you're going to see is not every college and university accepts recommendation letters. For instance, within my own institution, we differ there. With our traditional admission at Penn State, we don't accept letters of recommendation, but through our Schreier Honors College, we do. So whenever a college receives them or asks for them, know that we evaluate them. We like to hear from people who have observed you day in and day out. They are important pieces. Now, what are some of the other components that come with your application? Mary's going to talk to you about the portions that students are responsible for sending.
So students, as I know there are many of you as students on this conversation, there are certain key pieces that every application is going to require. A, the application. You'd be amazed at how many people will ask me, I talked to the coach, or I talked to the music faculty, or I talked to so-and-so. Do I still need to apply? Yes. That application is your entrance, if you will. That is the key component. Nothing else happens without that. I should also mention, without you hitting that submit button, we don't get the other pieces. So for example, if you call me and say, well, my counselor sent in my transcript and I haven't hit submit yet, that's nice, but it's hanging out there in suspension waiting for you to hit that submit button so that the two pieces can combine. We're getting a lot of that other information, but until we get your application, that's when the magic happens. That's when things start clicking. And there are several different types of applications, which I'm going to ask Jeremy to talk about in a moment. So check that out. What is the school looking for? Which application should you be using? Some applications have supplements. That can get interesting. Some will have one supplement, an additional essay. Some will have 5. Definitely pay attention to what that institution requires. Oftentimes they're tied into a nuance of that institution. Once upon a time, Gettysburg required a supplement, and we asked a question that was specifically related to our institution. It was, how have you made a difference in your community? Because at Gettysburg, we talk a lot about making a difference in your community. So there was a tie in there. So when you're looking at those supplements, pay attention to that piece. See, how does it tie into that particular institution? There's a reason they're asking that question. And frankly, they want to get to know a little bit more about you by asking that supplemental question, if they have it. But again, not every school has it. Now, Mike brought up such a good point about his institution and test scores. Many schools this year, in the face of the pandemic, have done away with a test score requirement. And when we say test scores, that means oftentimes SATs or ACTs, and sometimes for international students, that can mean the TOEFL or IELTS, some other terminology there. But suffice it to say, test scores for Pennsylvania students are often going to be the SATs and ACTs. But so many schools know, all of us know, it's been nearly impossible to take those tests. Or maybe you were signed up for them in March and they got canceled. So many schools, and there's actually a website called fairtest.org that actually has a list right now of the up-to-date test optional and test blind schools. And the difference there is test optional, it's optional. If you submit it, fabulous, great, the school will review it. If you don't, that's okay too. Gettysburg is also a test optional school. We've been test optional for over 10, 15 years now. Test blind, they're not going to look at it at all, even if you submit those scores. So there is a difference there, and some schools have chosen to go test blind this year. Other pieces, sometimes athletes, fine and performing arts, once again, my music folks, you might be doing an audition. You might be submitting a portfolio. You might be touching base with a coach and they need some additional forms. So do know that if you have some of those particular interests, ask that question. What else needs to be submitted? And lastly, those financial aid documents. What needs to be submitted there? Every school is going to require the FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. Every school is going to require that. And some schools have additional forms as well. Mike, what does the counselor send?
Thanks for asking, Mary. First, we talked earlier about the transcript really being the foundation of your application, right? That's a very important piece that all of us will review. There are a couple asterisks there for a couple different reasons. One, speaking directly to the students, counselors can't read your mind as to where you're applying. Right? So it's the student's responsibility to request that their transcript be sent to the schools that they are applying to. I also want to note, since we talked a little bit about test optional and test blind, the fact that some schools now are allowing students to self-report their curriculum and their grades in lieu of a transcript at the point of application. So we're going to talk a little bit later on about each school being a little bit different. I think it's very important as you shorten your list of schools to which you will apply to learn and understand what their specific requirements and processes are for completing an application. Oftentimes with that transcript will come a school profile or a school report, and oftentimes the school profile is adding some context for your achievements. What sort of honors or AP courses are offered at your school, if any? To Jeremy's point about your extracurricular list, what sorts of clubs and activities are offered at your high school? What percentage of students are looking to go to four-year schools versus community colleges versus into the military or the workforce? These are all facts and figures that help us, again, put into context what you've experienced in high school and what opportunities you've been able to take advantage of. Letters of recommendation, again, those can really round out your application. And we oftentimes, when on the admissions side of the desk, when we talk to students, they say, I really wish that I wasn't being looked at just like a GPA and a test score, a number, so to speak, but I wish you could kind of get a sense of my personality. And that's where your personal statement and your letters of recommendation can really add that context for us as we're reviewing your application. And I think that the letters of recommendation really should add to your application, not just duplicate what we already know, right? So think of it in terms of adding to your personal statement, to your transcript, to your extracurricular list. Those are very important things. And I want to mention that I think all of us would agree that the best recommenders when you go to ask for a letter of recommendation really are the people who know you the best, not necessarily the teacher who gave you the best grade. So again, we want to get to know you as a person through those letters of recommendation, what your trials and tribulations and what your successes have been. So feel free to choose people who know you the best. And last but not least, I use this phrase a lot. I've used it already. I want to say sprint through the tape, right? Many schools are going to ask for mid-year grades and certainly final grades to see how you rounded out your senior year of high school. We want to make sure that you're sprinting through that tape, that you're taking challenging courses all the way through the end of your high school career and doing well. And a big part of that is we want you to be successful and prepared when you come to our campuses. And so finishing in a strong fashion in your senior year is going to make sure that you're as prepared as possible for the start of your freshman year on our campuses. And then I will toss the mic to Jeremy to talk a little bit about the different types of decision plans.
Yeah, as you saw from the title of our discussion, we really want to help you build a great application, a successful application. But in order to do that, you need to actually know how to apply to each of these colleges and universities and what admissions plans they actually offer as options, right? So there are three primary types of college applications that you can apply to our schools through. There's the common application. There are 900 different colleges and universities that use the common application. Gettysburg and Penn State are two of those 900 institutions. And some of them will have a supplement, right? So there's another additional Penn State portion to that application, but some of them do not. Like Mary indicated, Gettysburg does not have that supplement. So understand that even within the Common App, this one application that can be used for multiple schools, there may be some differences in what we require you to fill out additionally as part of it. But this is also, no pun intended, the most common way you see a lot of students apply to our colleges and universities every year. Another one that you might start hearing a little bit more about here and there is the coalition application. Now, the coalition application is one that has 150 different colleges and universities that are a part of it, and they have to meet different graduation rate requirements and financial aid requirements to be a part of that coalition application. There are some universities that use this exclusively, and some universities that use it as an additional piece. Like Penn State, we are a part of the coalition application, but it's not the only way you apply to us as opposed to some other universities. School-specific applications are also out there. Slippery Rock, for instance, is one of those universities that has their own specific application. It's the only way to apply to Slippery Rock, so don't go to the Common App looking for them. You have to do it through their school-specific one. And sometimes there's advantages to that. For instance, the Slippery Rock application is going to go directly to Slippery Rock. They're not going to have to wait for an external organization to get that application to them. So a lot of times the turnaround time for it arriving in their system is more direct. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, when it comes to decision plans at institutions, it's important to know what is out there for you, because this can increase or sometimes decrease your opportunity to be admitted to their school. Let's start off with restrictive. These are the scary ones that students come up to us about all the time, wondering, is this what I need to do for your school, or how does this work? Parents ask us about early decision all the time. Early decision is interesting in that it has you apply early to schools that offer it. You may hear back earlier, but it's a legally binding arrangement. So you are only allowed to apply to one college or university under early decision. Because if they admit you, you are legally bound to attend. So understand what you're getting yourself into. Now, some of you may think, well, how are you going to hold me to that? There's no way at the end of the day, if I say I can't come, you're not going to let me. Well, keep in mind that in order to apply to these schools as an early decision student, you actually have to sign off on it. Your parents have to sign off on it. Your school counselor has to sign off on it. So that university can show you that documentation at the end of the year if you try to change your mind. Early action single choice is a little bit of a hybrid between traditional early action and early decision. There's no legally binding component to it, but schools like Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, they predicate that you're only allowed to apply to one of them as an early action applicant. So it's important to understand that as you fill out your list of schools. What about non-restrictive decision plans? Well, some of the common ones you see are early action, priority deadline, rolling decision. Early action is where you apply early. You may hear back earlier, but there's no legally binding aspect of that or a certain time where you have to let us know whether or not you're coming. May 1st will be your traditional deadline for that. Priority deadline is something that we at Penn State used to have some years ago. We've gone away from it in favor of early action and rolling admission, but there are a number of schools that say, hey, listen, if you get it into us by a certain date, then we'll typically turn it around by like the end of January or early February. So there's a benefit to applying by that priority, hence the priority part of that word. You do get some benefit to being in that group, but it's a little bit more easy in terms of, its restrictions than some of the other forms. Rolling admission just means as applications come into that school, they make decisions and put out decisions. So it's a constant rolling process at that institution. No hard deadlines necessarily. For rolling admission and regular decision, a lot of times they'll say, hey, get it into us by January or February. Then we may turn over a decision by March or April. Open admission is something that you find at a lot of community colleges where you still have to apply. You can't just show up and say, hey, I want to schedule classes. So you still have to fill out some form of an application. But as long as you've graduated from high school or you have your GED, you will be able to take classes at that particular institution. Now let's talk about some application tips.
But I'll pause just a moment to highlight one other piece about early decision. As somebody who did apply early decision, actually to Gettysburg, back in the 90s, I did apply early decision to Gettysburg. One of the big questions I get on that particular decision plan is, what about financial aid? I love the institution, but I don't know if I can financially afford it. That's where having the conversations with your admissions officers like us and saying, what's the possibility, and checking out and doing good homework, like the net price calculator, which allows you to get an estimate of what you could qualify for, is really helpful. I will tell you, nobody is going to, if it comes down to it and you apply to a school early decision and it just financially doesn't work out, nobody's going to handcuff you. Nobody's going to push back and say, but you signed that document, you agreed. We're very reasonable people. And we're going to have that conversation first and foremost to say, well, what are the possibilities? Is there something we didn't know about in maybe those financial aid documents or in other things? We're going to talk a little bit more. So while yes, there is the restrictive and the non-restrictive, there's always some gray in the middle. And the most important piece is asking. Ask your admissions officers. We're not scary people. We like to have these conversations. And now we're having lots and lots of virtual conversations. With that being said, really the meat and potatoes of this conversation is our tips on this whole application process. But I'm actually going to pause. We are going to pause. And for 30 seconds, we would like you to read this. And then we're actually going to just take this slide down and have this conversation. And frankly, I'm also going to encourage you to put questions in our chat box, in that Q&A box. So 30 seconds. I think I counted my 30 seconds correctly. Jeremy, what would you say is your favorite application tip?
Great question, Mary. And as we were developing this session, we spent a lot of time talking about this, right? And trying to figure out which one we wanted to speak to. And I decided that I really wanted to touch on the what makes you special aspect. If you're applying for a job when you get to the real world, right? Essentially, this is something that they're trying to get to through the manner of their questions, and even college interviews do the same thing. What are you bringing to our college or university? What makes you unique? What makes you special? Now, for some students, the more confident students, let's say, they may not struggle as much to mention what they think makes them special or unique. But all of us in admissions have had students who say, there's nothing special about me. How in the world am I to answer this question or to give a college or university an idea of what makes me special when there is nothing that makes me special? Well, that's not true. What you may need to do in those particular times when you feel that way is talk to other people who know you in different ways. For instance, have you ever asked your mom or dad, Mom, Dad, is there anything about me that stands out to you or that you really appreciate about me? No doubt they're going to have certain things that immediately come off the tip of their tongue. Or what about relatives of yours or friends of yours? What do you enjoy about our friendship? What do you feel I bring to our group? Maybe your teachers who have observed you day in and day out. Maybe they pick up on little things about you. So your mom may say, you know what's been interesting to me, Cassie or Jonathan? It's always been interesting when we have these family reunions and family gatherings, and that all the young ones, all the kids in the family just flock towards you. See, you may not view that as special, but what you may be seeing in that instance is that you're a person who's approachable. Maybe you're seeing you're a person who validates the presence of other people. See, kids, and all of us have children who are on this panel, they sniff that stuff out immediately about people. And so you don't view that as a special trait, but don't you think things like a person who's approachable and a person who values other people, don't you think those are qualities and characteristics we appreciate on our college campuses? See, that does make you special. When I was your age in high school, believe it or not, I was very quiet. And it wasn't until my senior year that I learned what made me special. See, I asked this question of somebody. I just felt like I was a stick in the mud, right? Like I felt like there was nothing unique about me until one of my friends said, do you realize that every single person that you're friends with confides in you? And I said, yeah, I've always wondered, like people meet me and they just tell me everything about them for some reason, right? They said, that's because you're trustworthy and you listen. That's what I bring to every organization, company, college, or university. That's what made me special. So take time to acknowledge these things, to ask others about these qualities that you possess, and then do the best that you can to articulate that to us at the colleges and universities.
So I'm up next. My favorite topic or question is really similarly related to what Jeremy was talking about, and that is, as an admissions professional, what are you going to bring to our campus? And there are really 2 or 3 points that I'd like to make quickly. I think all of us would agree that if you're able to find the right fit for your college choice, that your 4 years on our campus, you're going to hopefully evolve and grow and have a lot of positive experiences and broaden your horizons to places that you can't imagine right now, right? But I like to flip that on its head and ask a different question. I know you're going to be a different person based on your 4 years on our campus, but how is our campus going to be different because you spent 4 years engaged and an active member of this community? So oftentimes I think when you're 17, 18 years old going through this process, it's really one of the first opportunities you've had in your life to be introspective, right? To Jeremy's point, what makes you special? What makes you unique? What are you going to contribute to your new community? And not all the time, but oftentimes families can be rather homogeneous. High schools and communities can be rather homogeneous. And this is your first opportunity to say, how am I a little bit unique? What am I going to bring to a very diverse community that hopefully makes it greater than the sum of its parts? And so there's real value in asking those questions and trying to uncover some of those answers. So that's my favorite question to ask students. Why is our campus going to be different? Because you engaged with us. Mary, what's yours?
One of my favorites is the authenticity piece. I think that's a buzzword we tend to throw around a lot in this space. Make sure you're authentic. Are you hearing the authentic voice of the institution? What the heck does that mean? When I think about the word authenticity, it means what's your true voice? For example, if you're writing the essay and you want to talk a little bit about, in some way, shape, or form, somewhere in there, why you love that particular college, and you use the word, your college is a fantastic college. As I said to my nephew, do you really use the word fantastic all the time? Is that really part of your regular vocabulary? If it's not, don't use it. If you are in several different clubs and then there's this other additional piece that you did, maybe it was one time in your freshman year for 5 minutes, that's not really a part of the things that you're involved with. It's not really authentically who you are. It may be one of those list of things, but it's not really all that you do. There are 3 major things that you do. List those things, talk about those things. We don't need that laundry list, if you will. Be authentic, be real, use your language. And if you're funny, great, be funny in the application. Use that terminology, use those phrases that are funny. If you're not, don't. Be authentic in your voice. And if one of the things that, another note that was on that slide was about grit and determination. And to me, that plays a role in that authenticity as well. And I've been asked the question, well, how do you determine that? Again, it's through that voice, through those activities. Maybe it's through an interview conversation. Maybe it's through the personal statement or the essay. All of those things help us to hear your voice, if you will. Now, before we move into the next piece on sort of our similarities and differences, there is a chat question that came up about, I'm a first-generation student. Should I include this in the application? Absolutely. Why not? That tells us a little bit more about you. In some ways, the application is the puzzle that is you. And every piece puts a bit more of that puzzle together. The essay, the biographic information on whether it be family members, your own situation, all of that helps to put the pieces of the puzzle together, helps us to get to know you. So yes, short answer to that question, absolutely, sure, why not? And then next up, similarities and differences. We're 3 very different institutions. Where are the similarities in our application process and where are the differences? Jeremy?
This is a great question because just like we've talked about you students having special and unique qualities, we in admission have special and unique qualities about how we evaluate applications, but we also have through lines. We have commonalities. You especially see this in the value of the transcript. It's so funny. At times I go to a high school and I talk to a student after my Penn State visit, and they'll say to me, you know, Jeremy, I've been involved in 15 different clubs and organizations, 5 of which I've started. I have a 1.98 GPA, but I will tell you, I will be involved in everything by the time I come to Penn State. That is great. I am so happy you've been involved and you've added to your community. But the most important thing to me, when I sit down with your college application, is not only about admitting you to the first year, but how can I graduate you? When you looked at those statistics I shared on the Penn State screen in the beginning to help you understand my institution, we have a 93% retention rate and an 85% graduation rate. What does that tell you? Well, that tells you that we are really serious about student success, comfortability, success in the classroom, and the ability to matriculate and graduate from our institution. Your high school transcript gives me the best indication of that when I'm sitting down with your application. It gives me an idea as to whether or not even your major makes sense. If you've had D's in all of your science and math classes and you've applied for engineering, we need to have a conversation. Right? Or if you're a student who says, hey, I want to be a communications major. Well, your performance in your English classes, in some of your extracurricular classes, right? That may give me an idea as to whether or not that's a good fit as well. So your transcript is always going to carry the most weight. As Mary indicated, and I believe Michael said as well, we want to connect with you. And I think that this is one of the things that got me to stay in admission for more than 1 year. I fell in love with working with students because all of us on this panel, we've been you before. We've sat where you've sat. We've felt that anxiety of, oh my God, am I going to be admitted anywhere? We've also had those highs of, oh my gosh, my first college acceptance came in the mail. We remember what that is like. And part of the reason we're involved in this work is we want to make that easier on you. and we're excited about what you're going to bring to whatever college or university you wind up attending. We like to engage with you. We like to provide you with guidance. We like to help you along this journey. That's why we've taken out this time in our day to talk to you about these things as well. This is especially true this year. Mary mentioned there's been a lot of disruption that's gone on. This is especially the case in the high school, in the college part of our high school visits and how we normally engage with students through college fairs. That has changed. So admissions officers, more than any other time, are interested in connecting with you. We're interested in you finding the right fit, even if that doesn't mean our institution. A number of years ago, a young man who was heavily involved in his orchestra visited Penn State Brandywine campus and said, I love everything Penn State offers academically. I love the size of your campus, and I look forward to joining your orchestra. We at the Brandywine campus do not have an orchestra. So I had to let him know, I would love to have you here as a student, but one of the things you spent significant time with and on is your music throughout your high school career. You may want to think about that when it comes to your college. So he wound up not coming, but that meant the most to me because he found a school that was the right fit. We're not just recruiting you for this year. We hope this is a lifelong relationship. You know, that large alumni base we have at Penn State, the world's largest of its kind, that's something that we have built as an institution. It matters to us and it matters to the students who have come. We are hoping that you will always feel a part of our campus community and what's going on here. So, and we value that. All of our universities, Slippery Rock does, Gettysburg does, Penn State does. We value that heavily, that this is a lifelong relationship that you have. But that's it for the similarities. Where do those differences lie? Let's talk about that now.
I do want to jump in real quick. I know we are on our final 4 minutes and we do have one slide on our personal statement, the essay, but 30 seconds. Michael May.
Yeah, so while there are similarities, there are also differences. Just want to point out that every school weighs the components of the application differently. Some are based on quantitative figures like Slippery Rock, while others are more of a holistic review, including things like letters of recommendation and a personal statement. Schools also look at demonstrated interest differently. Have you visited campus? Did you take advantage of an alumni interview? Have you filed the FAFSA? Things like that. We want to make sure that we're connecting with students who want us just as badly as we want them. And finally, I want to mention that schools have different avenues to their campus, right? Some campuses just have undergraduate students, not graduate students. Some have more commuters or students taking online classes. And a school like Slippery Rock, about a third of our new students are actually transfer students, while other campuses are traditional residential four-year communities. And I'll toss it to you, Mary, to talk a little bit about the personal statement.
And last but not least, the personal statement, which I feel like is the anxious part of the application. First off, take a breath. It will be fine. This is one piece of the puzzle. But I will highlight one bullet point here, and that is personal statement versus essay. The goal of a personal statement is to get to know you. What are you bringing to our institution? It is not an essay. We're not wanting to know every detail about everything you've done in various different activities. It is not a term paper of something you wrote in history class. It is an opportunity for us to get to know you, what you're passionate about, what you're excited about, how you've handled change, how you've handled challenge. That last point about this year's COVID-19 question is a new question on the Common Application, will allow you to talk to us about what has happened that has impacted you. There are a lot of different things we can talk about in regards to the essay. Suffice it to say, help us to get to know you in your own words, to go back to that authenticity piece. Answer the prompt and stay focused. This is not the time to talk about 5 different things. This is the time to focus on 1 or 2 things. Answer the prompt. That's a bit about the personal statement. I will quickly just walk through our final 2 slides. Yes, we've had a lot of change in this final year, as we've discussed as a panel. And we would love to share our last thoughts. So I will turn it over to Jeremy for a final 30-second and to Mike for a final 30-second.
Take a deep breath, breathe. It's going to work out. And remember that all of our institutions also have other events. If you want to find out more about Gettysburg, Penn State, and Slippery Rock, we'll have other presentations. To Penn State's is on Tuesday at 7 p.m. And I'm sure the other universities have some upcoming as well. So there's more to find out about us, and we're happy to engage with you later.
I'll just share one of my favorite quotes. The true reward for someone's hard work is not what they get from it, but who they become through it. So enjoy the journey. It will work out.
And we look forward to meeting all of you through this process, whether it be virtually or in person. Thank you so much for joining our session. It will be available on the PACAC website. We will turn it gladly back over to Liz Forsini, our Chair of College Fairs.
Thank you everyone for a wonderful first panel for our Keystone Virtual College Exploration. After this session ends, there will be a quick survey, 4 quick questions, and we'd love for you to complete that to help us get your feedback about the program. As Mary mentioned, there are also hundreds of additional sessions from October 1st through November 6th. And you can also view recordings from this session and all future sessions. Both the registration and the recordings are available at www.pacac.org/virtual. Have a great day.